So India's strength are clearly on the data front, right? Because it is now the largest country in the world, and it has the digital ID system, and so there's a lot of data on basic demographics and how people live their lives and transact. And so there's a strength there, and of course it has a foundation of digital talent through its IITs and other institutes. Where it is falling short is on the development of AI, let's call it foundation models to speak the latest LLM language.
The Sound of Money with Santosh Sirur.
Hi, and welcome back on another super episode of The Sound of Money. And today, joining me from the United States is Dr. Olaf Groth. He is an amazing personality joining me, and we're going to talk about AI. It's the buzzword across the globe, and we're going to get deep dive into that with the help of Dr. Groth. Now, Dr. Groth is the founder and the CEO of Cambrian Futures. He's also a professor of practice at the Haas School, which is associated with Berkeley, University of California. He's also at HALT Business School and UT Malaysia. So I'm sure for Dr. Groth, life is very busy, both from an academic perspective and also his profession, as a part of the founder and CEO of Cambrian Futures. So let's welcome Dr. Groth. So Dr. Groth, welcome. And how busy has life been for you?
It's a true pleasure to be with you, Santosh. Thank you so much. I should say with you and your audience. And yes, life is busy, traveling the globe, but that's where my heart and soul are. And when you're a dot connector and a discovery-oriented explorer, as it were, then busy is good.
Absolutely. Wonderful to know that. So Dr. Groth, the first question I have for you is about AI, of course. And AI or artificial intelligence, it feels like such an umbrella term nowadays. And could you kind of simplify it or maybe explain to my audiences how to think about the different branches of AI?
Sure. Look, AI is the automation of sense-making and decision-making processes, cognitive sense-making, of course, right? What other kind would there be? And we really have to think about the recent progress as a bit of a cascade from neural networks, right? So neural network-based learning, which we also call machine learning, into deep learning, supervised and unsupervised, and then a variant of that, which combines different statistical methods that we now call LLMs. From there, we may see a progression into large multimodal models, and already seeing this, and then eventually to multi-agent systems, MAS, which will take a bunch of different LLMs, LMMs, and other agent technologies that will interact with each other toward the global agent economy, as it were.
Yeah. Okay. My next question to you, Dr. Groth, is specific to India. And as you know, India has been quite active into the tech space. Having said that, in your opinion, where do you see the gaps in India on AI development? Now, what kind of steps India can take to bridge that gap and, more importantly, catch up with the US and the Chinas?
So India's strength are clearly on the data front, right? Because it is now the largest country in the world, and it has the digital ID system, and so there's a lot of data on basic demographics and how people live their lives and transact. And so there's a strength there. And of course, it has a foundation of digital talent through its IITs and other institutes. Where it is falling short is on the development of AI, let's call it foundation models to speak the latest LLM language, but really sort of the advanced computational technologies that constitute machine learning, deep learning, large language models now. That's where it has fallen short. It's there. There are some institutes that have programs that develop Masters of Science and PhDs, but they're rare for a large country of its size. It is definitely punching under its weight. If it were to punch higher, there is tremendous potential in India, especially when it comes to personal finance as well as personal individual health management.
Okay, okay. Let's talk about Nvidia, right? Very much talked about it, and it's talked about as the most valuable company today. But many commentators say that it's a little bit of a hype. Is it justified? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, look, it's kind of like India, right? The largest country and the largest company by
Yeah,
value in the world. Both have tremendous promise,
yeah.
and also some handicaps, right? Now, in Nvidia's case, the handicap is not self-made. In fact, I know the company a little bit, and like other companies in that space, notably Qualcomm, etc. It has phenomenal engineering talent, right? The handicap here is not internal, it is external, it is really downstream. You remember the dot-com bust, right? The dot-com bubble that burst
Yeah.
at the turn of the 1999 to 2000.
Yeah.
And that too was driven by really a downstream lack of return on investment, driven by healthy business fundamentals and healthy business models. And that's where I see, and my folks, my team at Cambrian see the risk, and we're not the only ones by a long stretch, that downstream innovators are not exercising enough discipline on ensuring that they both innovate to and then also sell narrowly defined use cases with narrowly defined target functions that really speak to a quantifiable problem that is then tied back to either business unit strategy, corporate strategy, or product strategy. So with discrete metrics, right, that will prove there are efficiency gains, there are profitability gains, there are productivity gains, there's top line growth, whatever the metric is, there needs to be a metric measuring that you're actually accomplishing something above and beyond what you've done so far, even for sandbox experiments, right? Because you need to prove that there is a there. And I think it's not the technology itself, and it's not the chipsets that are powering the technology. That's all fine. It's really the downstream issue with proving out ROI. So it's often a lack of commercial discipline and strategic focus that is hurting us. But if we get that right, and my group and others are working on, company AI readiness frameworks and assessments, use case frameworks that will help clients calibrate. If we get that right, then I think Nvidia, which is upstream, will be even more golden than it is right now. If we don't get it right, then at some point CFOs will stop spending money on expensive chipsets.
Okay, that's going to be very interesting. If you had a crystal ball, where do you see the next AI breakthrough? And I know it's a very difficult question and to even predict something on that, but kind of a ballpark, where do you see the next AI breakthrough?
If I had a crystal ball, I would be hosting you on one of my 15 islands that I own, or maybe I'd start my own country. I don't know what it is with the billionaires having to start their own cities and countries and islands. But if I had a crystal ball, I would tell you that number one, I already touched on this, we will see agglomerations of modular AI systems. And they could be, large clusters of LMs, LMMs strung together into multi-agent systems. They could be, large language models with traditional machine learning, with heuristic learning, with expert systems that we're now bringing back. Remember, expert systems, heuristic learning was where AI really started 70 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And we will enhance all of this into clusters, into agglomerations that together will not only make our lives much easier, but will also constitute a very different kind of intelligence that we haven't dealt with before, that is not like human intelligence,
Hmm.
but will be general,
Yeah.
as it were, in its totality. Now, there are some other very cool horizons. One is that we will be embedding artificial intelligence into robotics. So once you
Yeah.
give robots, skin, as it were, and various sensor systems, then you could see how that wetware,
Yeah.
in the head,
Hmm.
um, will be trained very differently, will become autonomous in a much more physical sense.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's a whole nother breakthrough horizons for intelligence. And then lastly, we may be seeing certain learnings and certain systems being developed based on those learnings on how children cognate and how children's intelligence works. We have really been dismissing how children learn as an inferior intelligence. They're small humans, they're immature, they haven't grown through puberty yet.
Yeah.
But really, that's dismissing a very particular type of intelligence that, frankly, learns much faster than grown-ups do. And,
Absolutely. The
you
synapses
know,
that they get formed. Yeah.
bingo, right? And so we may actually learn a lot of things there that will inform our thinking on how AI can develop. Just imagine, why is it that a child
Yeah.
is able to touch a hot stoveplate once with
True.
a data sample of one, right? And why is it the case that our statistical systems need a statistically valid and representative system of whatever it is, 100, 1,000 trials touching the hot stoveplate, right? So things like that.
Absolutely. Really, really amazing space out there. Dr. Groth, public figures like Elon Musk, for instance, and others have actually warned about the dangers of AI. So what kind of risks really do you see, and what do you think that governments can do? And I know governments have made an effort already to regulate it and protect consumers. So there is this kind of, where does really regulation require to come in at this point in time, or does it need to have more space and then come up with the regulation later? So what's the kind of balancing act that you think should be done at this point in time, at least?
Yeah, look, when it comes to other emerging technologies, I'm a big fan of letting a thousand flowers bloom, the American innovation system that espouses that philosophy has done really well throughout the last 250 plus years, and especially since World War II. But this one is different.
Yeah.
And so the answer to your question is yes, we need regulation. We need thoughtful regulation, which is unfortunately a big question mark. We need more people and governments around the world who understand artificial intelligence on a deeper level and who can lead to smart innovation without quelling
Hmm.
that entrepreneurial instinct. But we are now at a point in time where if we don't regain and build up public trust in artificial intelligence, and we're seeing diminishing trust. The trust barometers of various consultancies are showing us this. And if we don't rebuild that and increase it,
Yeah.
then people will stop buying in, and then we'll have more tech clash, as they say.
Yeah.
That is particularly the case when it comes to how we treat data near term, how we treat intellectual property. We need digital intellectual property rights. We need new regulation. In America, we have the APRA, the American Privacy Rights Act, pending,
Yeah.
notably a bit later than the Europeans and the Chinese, as it were, but I'm confident that it will happen over the next couple of years. Now, that is all stuff that we need right now.
Hmm.
What Musk and others are talking about, and the likes of Stuart Russell, who is a colleague of mine, is the kind of existential risk
Yeah.
of AI literally leading to the weaponization of everything that has AI in it.
Hmm.
And that therefore, especially once you start clustering different AIs, that therefore there's a pathway to dominating or killing or enslaving humans. I do believe that that is possible. I do believe that is 10, 15, 20 years at least out, but you never know. So I'm grateful that people like those colleagues and like Elon Musk are saying, better be careful earlier than regretting later.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. Let's talk about the student community, and especially you have been on the ground there with students interacting, not just in the United States, but now also in KL. And any advice for students getting into AI? How should they decide which field is probably best suited for them? And how has been
Yeah,
interaction maybe with the students on the ground?
yeah, I will tell you that when we look at current generation of graduate students that are seeking to get into tech, right? They're at once stimulated, exhilarated, and passionate about the new horizons of AI and data science, and at once also, frankly, a bit turned off when they're seeing that people without AI and data science skills are no longer considered desirable tech talent,
Wow.
right? So tech talent doesn't equal tech talent. You have to have data science, you have to have AI, right? We're now seeing layoffs of tech talent in favor of hiring more AI and data science talent. And so every student, those that want to go into tech and those that don't necessarily want to go into tech, have to get at least sort of one or two AI and data science courses under their belts, understand how the stuff works, how you shape it, how you apply it, where the human control is, how to govern it. Because tech is now becoming a horizontal layered across all other, verticals of jobs in the job market. So no matter who you are and where you go, you have to have at least a few courses under your belt. I tell my students, I probably shouldn't, but I tell them, pay less attention to the grades. Don't be afraid just because, you may not be mathematically inclined. I get that, but at least get, a good passing grade so you know how it works,
Yeah.
you grok it, right? And you can shape it. That's all that matters longer term.
Absolutely. I think it's a very good point that, getting oneself updated all through, and especially courses like these will make a huge difference. And it's not just the rat race for the grades, right?
And I should also say, Santosh, right? Equally important is that as we all get smarter on AI and data, we also get smarter on humans. So at Berkeley, we have now fused data and computing with the humanities, with social science, with natural science, in this new CDSS college that we founded.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's going to be really big because the substantive knowledge will become increasingly important for AI as well. And the two really need to be merged and fused.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's talk, Dr. Groth, about the implications of AI, which jobs will be most impacted. And that's the most important point of discussion in today's age and today's world. What can students, and including more so Indian students, do now to prepare for the systemic changes in labor markets?
Yeah, look, I'm not a fan of these doom and gloom folks that say we'll see 40% of all jobs going away by 2040 or 2050. That's not usually how life works out, right? However, it is true that AI is more pervasive and is coming quicker in many more areas of life than previous technologies, and therefore the time to adjust is shorter and there is more pressure. Okay. I like the McKinsey numbers, and the McKinsey numbers I think are well balanced and yet instill a sense of urgency. They are that 60% of all job categories will have about 30% task displacement within them. Okay. Yeah, there will be some job categories that will go away altogether, but that's not the majority. We have to wonder about the 60 and 30%. Okay.
Yeah.
So what that means is that students in India, just like students anywhere else, have to pay attention to whether they fall into that 60% that will have 30% displacement and figure out how to utilize that 30%. Some of this will be getting smart on AI and data science, steering it, integrating it with content. And then it's what Kai-Fu Lee, fellow author, a friend of mine, called human veneer, right? Which is get smart on AI and data science, put socio-emotional intelligence around it, and then communicate what it's saying to other humans who don't have that training. Some of the 30% will be that, right? Some of the 30% will be entirely new job categories. But then some of that 30%, you're going to have to figure out what to do completely different.
Yeah.
And you, as a job candidate, need to take the initiative. Don't rely on large organizations or the government doing it for you. They won't. I'm
Hmm.
not saying they won't ever, but they're not going to do it fast enough. And it's often easier for companies to consolidate 30% parts
Yeah.
and let one of you go than it is to actually figure out what the future of jobs look like. And that's a sad reality.
Yeah.
Europeans are a little bit better than we are in America, I think. But ask yourself, are you signing on with an organization that is that foresightful? And if not, what are you going to do about it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's all that's where the vision comes in, right? Comes into play. Google Gemini was pulled after throwing up historically inaccurate results, right? Example, when people search for Vikings, which are historically Scandinavian Europeans, they were mostly showing examples of Black Vikings. Is this a concern on how AI can distort history? And more importantly, does it show the programming bias of software developers?
Yeah. I want to be a California Viking. How is that? Like a Beach Boy Viking. That doesn't exist, but wouldn't
Yeah,
it be fun to kind of figure out what that actually
absolutely. Yeah.
would entail? But see, what I'm trying to get at, Santosh, is that there is a distinction here, right? So what Gemini served up, and let me be very clear, I think top management should have been on top of its release,
Hmm.
should have tested it before it hit the market, because that was not a tough one to foresee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But leaving that aside for a moment, what Gemini did is it essentially invented a whole bunch of stuff that didn't historically exist.
Hmm.
It can actually be really valuable if you're talking to, as I am, some very major conglomerates in entertainment and media around the world
Yeah.
who are actually saying, I would want me some of that creative AI that hallucinates and gives me some visions that provoke my
Yeah.
own creativity, my own imagination, right?
True. True.
But see, that's a very different use case and application. It's valid, but when you're selling something as representing empirically accurate truth that is based on ground truth on facts,
Yeah.
then of course you're in trouble. So you need to distinguish between the creativity enhancing hallucinations, that's one sale,
Yeah.
and the fact-based empirical truth on another, and be very discerning what kind of model you're developing or selling and what kind of model you're adopting and applying.
Agreed. Absolutely. But Dr. Groth, how are Apple's recent AI advancement, and it's more so in the Apple intelligence around the new functionalities, right? And what are the main concerns in this current debate with user privacy and in the generation about AI integration generally?
Yeah, look, let's be clear. Apple has never really been, at least not for the most part, a first mover on anything,
Yeah.
right? Apple has always been a fast follower. Now, within that fast followership, it has done revolutionary things.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm not saying it's not disruptive, and I'm not saying it's not hugely valuable.
Yeah.
But it was no surprise to me that they weren't first with a large language model or something like it.
Hmm.
And so it was a natural thing for them to do.
Yeah.
It seemed a little rushed, and I think the watchfulness we're now seeing on its privacy proposition, which is a differentiation of Apple's that it has to live up to, right?
Hmm.
You really have to live up to that, and so the OpenAI Alliance will receive some good pressuring on privacy.
Hmm.
Allegedly, Apple has said, look, even when your data goes off your handset, and there's Apple's own AI on
Yeah.
the handset
Hmm.
that will keep your data processing and safe,
Hmm.
right? And then when it needs, for different use cases, it needs to go to the cloud, which is
Yeah.
the OpenAI Alliance.
Yeah.
Then it will make sure that your data is respected in that cloud environment. But
Yeah.
I haven't heard yet, maybe other people have,
Hmm.
how exactly that's done. And of course, Apple needs to be terribly careful to really make that happen so that my data doesn't end up training some AI, OpenAI server for some other purpose,
Absolutely.
right? Using my own creativity, my own IP, my own data to
Hmm.
monetize me outside of my relationship with Apple. That would be really bad.
Yeah. Terrible.
And so the proof is going to be in the pudding, right?
Absolutely. The current generation of smartphones that we have, they are preloaded with their own AI versions, right? How trustworthy and how is our data search protected with these kind of integrations?
So for the most part, it isn't.
Okay.
And so obviously we'll have to see what Apple does. Elon Musk has said he might develop a privacy respecting Tesla phone, right? Well, we're gonna have to see about that. There are actually some new Chinese brands now. I was just in China for the World Economic Forum annual meeting of the new champions, which is called Summer Davos. And during AMNC, the CEO of one of the handset makers said, absolutely, we have to put privacy first. Without privacy, no trust. Without trust, no commercial intimacy, right?
Yeah.
So I do think we have to pay attention to that. But I will tell you, I'm very skeptical that the vast majority of handset makers are actually owning that privacy focus. So we have to be vigilant. And there's where things break down, because most of us don't read user agreements. They're overly complicated. You could argue some of them are probably written not to be read.
Absolutely.
And so you click and you give your data away, and then, frankly, the cat's out of the bag, and that's bad, right? And so be watchful what the terms are, and work with your legislators to put these privacy protections in place, because we do need to make sure that we have an equal playing field across. Okay.
Absolutely.
And that needs to happen.
Absolutely. Let's end this conversation on a fun question, actually, Dr. Groth. Considering the recent announcement of the humanoid robot, right, by Elon Musk in China, how far do you think we are from the iRobot, the AI-powered robots typically becoming a consumer product?
Well, look, I think honestly, it's going to go the way the Apple iPhone went in 2007, right? Which is, there's going to be a basic version for people who have a good amount of discretionary income, and who are willing to experiment with something very early that is imperfect.
Yeah.
You could argue that the Tesla Model S was something like that, right? Which was a luxury item for people with high income. And the software wasn't quite yet everything that it is today, but people enjoyed being at the avant-garde, spending a bit more money, but leading the way, right? And so I think that Tesla humanoid will probably sell to two types of segments, would be my guess. I haven't talked to Mr. Musk nor his company. Will probably sell to automakers and other manufacturers with deep R&D pockets that want to try this out. It's going to be used as a cobot, cooperative robot that has contextual awareness of where the humans are to keep them safe. It'll be flawed. It will not be perfect. It'll be the Tesla autopilot that wasn't perfect, right? But there'll be special agreements under which that gets sold and refined. That's one segment. And the other segment, you could argue, are going to be the wealthy who don't mind spending whatever it is, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 on an imperfect home housekeeper, right? That will upgrade it over 10 years. And, to them, what's $30,000, right?
System upgrades, naturally system upgrades coming through all through.
Exactly. And if it's not working well, they put it in a closet and bring it back out when it is. But it's not going to be mass market for the foreseeable future.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Dr. Groth, you've been the author for Global Insights and Future on AI and Emerging Technologies Transforming Economies and Enterprises. In fact, your recent book, The Great Remobilization, basically the strategies and designs for a smarter global future. Again, coming back to the question of, where do you see the globe heading towards? And then when I'm talking of more geopolitically, what's your view? Where is the United States? Where is the China? Where is the India and the other rest of the, the continents as such? Where this is heading?
Yeah, so let me tell you. So the Great Remobilization, which you see shamelessly advertised behind me as well, right? Actually connects to the first book, Solomon's Code, or the paperback was called The AI Generation, in that it picks up that theme of disruptive technology forces changing our world, right? But then it lifts it up to a higher level and it says, okay, what are the 5 C's really doing to change the global economy? And the 5 C's are cognitive technologies like AI, right? Brain-computer interfaces, cognitive neuroscience and CRISPR, etc. Cybersecurity, crypto, and blockchain Web3. climate change, and China, right?
Yeah.
And so when these 5 or 6 clash, then what we're seeing is a new global economic order, and that is essentially an order of two poles, as it were. One around the United States. We do not believe that the United States is in permanent decline. That's a counter narrative to what's out there. Asia's rising, China's rising, U.S. in decline.
Yeah.
That may be true relatively speaking. Yes, China will be the other pole. It will continue to gain power, but there is going to be a balance because China itself has tremendous issues to grapple with. One of them is, of course, a declining population from 1.4 to a billion to 800 million. Doesn't have to be a negative because it means taking care of fewer people economically, but we do believe on balance it will increase in power. The United States will be more balanced with China. And then there'll be essentially around these two, and to a little degree Europe, but really Europe being in alignment mostly with the United States, will be issue-based circles and clubs, right? So India will choose the United States on certain types of issues, right? And it will choose maybe in a future world more respect for China if we can resolve some of the border issues and some of the adversarial tensions. It will also continue to have an alliance with Russia, right? Which is sort of alongside Europe, another great power that is not quite a superpower in our opinion in the global economy 2.0. And we will see issue-based clubs to where different countries can accede to different clubs in different issue areas. And those circles, as it were, are overlapping. So executives and diplomats alike have to get used to understanding that complex picture of morphing amoebas, right?
Yeah.
To mix metaphors of different clubs, which country is where on which issue. And so it's becoming a much more unwieldy, complex, non-linear kind of picture than what we normally call the global north, the global south, east versus west, right? Bretton Woods versus the rest. Clearly, that is all no longer valid. And so it sounds like chaos, but it isn't. When you read our book, you'll see where the order in all of this is and what we're saying about a new emerging institutional environment and what we as what we call design activist leaders need to do to see the new building blocks, to see the new logics and to work with them. And there is definitely a recipe. We've unpacked it into our Flip It framework, into our design activist leadership framework, and we're giving you a bit of a roadmap. So read the book.
Wonderful. I love that word, morphing amoebas of geopolitics. I love that because geopolitics has become such an interesting topic of discussion, debate, right? And there's so much ever-changing landscape across the globe. Well, interesting days ahead, I guess. Dr. Olaf Groth, founder and CEO, Cambrian Futures. He's also the professor of practice across universities, the United States and in Malaysia. And of course, the author of his recent book and a couple of other books, The Great Remobilization. Dr. Groth, thank you so much for being with me on this edition of The Sound of Money. Looking forward to having you more, where we can talk a lot more on the later part of it, what we discuss on geopolitics, maybe in due course.
Anytime, Santosh. Thank you. And thank you. Thanks to your audience.
Thank you. Most welcome. Most welcome. And well, with that, we come to the end of this episode of The Sound of Money. Hope you guys had a great time listening in to Dr. Groth. Looking forward to many more episodes of The Sound of Money from me, Santosh Siru, and Dr. Olaf Groth. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. Bye-bye and take care.
The Sound of Money with Santosh Siru.